Hello, everybody. This is Rick Harnish. I'm the Executive Director of the High Speed Rail Alliance. And I want to thank everybody for joining. I still see there's a couple of people coming on board, but we will go ahead and get started. We've got an exciting program, and I'm hoping that we'll have some really good questions as we move forward. But first, a little bit about us for those who are new to the organization. The High Speed Rail Alliance is an educational nonprofit. We strive to be the most knowledgeable independent source in the US of what high-speed rail is, why we should build it, and what steps our local, state, and federal leaders can take to make it happen. So we we educate folks about those things, and then we provide you, the listeners, the tools you need in order to educate your leaders, whether they be your local mayor, your state representatives and governors, or your representatives in Washington, D.C. We believe in what we call the integrated network approach, where rather than focusing on big city to big city with new infrastructure, we look at networks that serve a variety of towns with perhaps 20% new infrastructure, where you're building tracks for electrified trains going 200 miles an hour plus, and a lot of working with the existing railroads to upgrade shared use lines so that you can run frequent trains at 80 or 90 miles an hour. And in key areas, taking existing lines and rebuilding them for regional service, where you're focused on high frequency passenger service that may or may not be intermingled with freight. And let's not forget the importance of bus connections to small towns across. And by doing this, we can build a big coalition of folks across the country to have a big program to expand intercity passenger rail and transit and really change the way that people interact with each other in person. So we're looking for a big federal program that has impact across 49 states, and perhaps even something for Hawaii. Just as, you know, twice we've done massive highway programs, one starting just after World War II, and the other starting in the 50s to connect the entire country with highways. We want to be optimistic, combining those transformational high-speed lines with quick near-term wins. And we need to treat the Class I railroads as partners and valued vendors, not as antagonists in this program. So I'm excited today to have Ken Bauer, who is the Director of High Speed and Long Distance Passenger Services in Austria for the OBB, the Austrian Railroad. They have a mix of all of this in a very exciting way. Upgrading lines to high-speed standards, building new tunnels under the Alps, and being really the leader in a renaissance of night trains across the country. So thank you, and I am sorry, I'm a little confused about what I've got. Kurt, you're up. I can see you, and go ahead and take it away.
Yeah, hello everybody. Greetings from Vienna, Austria. I'm totally delighted to be here with you. It's really a big honor to present my company and the efforts we have here in Austria. I will start with a little presentation about some general things, and then I really would like to have some questions and probably some discussion going on how we can make the experience we have here in Europe, probably transferring those experiences towards the US in order to, probably in the long run, achieve something similar, which we have here in Europe. I'm gonna share my screen now, and I guess you can see something, right?
Yes, we got it.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Okay. The ÖBB is actually the state railways of Austria. Austria is a country in the middle of Europe, about 8 million inhabitants, so not very big. But I think that's the first thing which is important to notice. We are in the European Union, the country where people use trains the most. There's only one country in Europe where people are more eager to take the trains. This is Switzerland. But as they are not part of the European Union, actually Austria is the country in the European Union where people use the rail most. And ÖBB has three major pillars. It's the passenger service on the left, it's the rail cargo in the middle you can see, and it's the infrastructure on the right, or the third pillar in red. And I'm working for ÖBB Personenverkehr. My name is Bauer, and as it was already mentioned, I'm director for the long distance passenger services, all international services, all night train services. I've got quite a huge department, one team does the timetabling, one team does the pricing and yield management, one team does the customer experience, etc., etc. I will speak a little bit now about the passenger rail. And as I was saying, the Austrians are very eager to travel. We transport approximately 1.3 million travelers a day, which is quite a number given the number of inhabitants of around 8 million in Austria. And we've got the three major products, which is called the RailJet. The RailJet is our high-speed train, not necessarily the same as we understand high speed in France or Germany. We can run up to 230 kilometers per hour, but for a country like Austria, this is absolutely sufficient. Then we've got the NightJet, which is the actually European-wide network of night trains in Europe. And we've got the CityJet. CityJet is the premium trains for the local and regional trains. What you can see here is the map of Europe, or at least quite a part of Europe, I would say. And you can see here where we operate trains to. The white spot in the middle is this tiny little Austria. We serve all our neighboring countries with day trains and night trains. I think the important message here is that we do this not totally on our own in the other countries, but we work a lot with the other state railways and operators. So we as ÖBB really truly believe that the cooperation among European operators is the way forward in order to get also the climate goals and objectives which we have here in Europe. In Europe, we've got the Green Deal going on, which is by the European Union, and we significantly have to shift to other modes of transport, from other modes of transport to rail, because as we know, basically everywhere in the world, traffic and transport is one of the big problems in battling the climate change, because the CO2 emissions of other modes of transport are really significant. So the European Union has this year also the year of rail, and they really try to boost rail and rail transport. But, and this is the same everywhere in the world, railway can only be as good as infrastructure is. And building infrastructure, reconstructing infrastructure, refurbishing infrastructure costs an awful lot of money and takes an awful lot of time. I think that's basically the same truth all over the world. However, this is how we connect Europe. I've got some more figures for you here. Like in the long distance services where I'm the director of, you can see we transport about 38 million passengers a year, which is a huge number if you compare it to countries like France or Germany, where of course in absolute terms, they have more passengers, but in relative terms, ÖBB carries much more long distance passengers than Deutsche Bahn or the SNCF in France. We operate about 300 trains daily, and more than half of them operate internationally. This again is a significant number, giving that other operators in Europe basically or mainly focus on their domestic market. And the punctuality is also, I think, quite okay, with nearly 92% of all long distance trains are running on time. On time means that a train is not delayed more than 5 minutes and 29 seconds. If a train is delayed more than that, we call it delayed. I was already saying that the CO2 issue is a huge issue for us. And we call ourselves the biggest climate saving company in Austria. And we really do this because we are in the very lucky position that most of our trains operate electrically, and that we, due to our difficult history, produce all of our energy on our own with water power plants. This is the good thing. If you've got a lot of mountains, you can easily use the water coming down from the mountains for building electricity. And after World War, the history is also quite interesting. I think after World War I, there was remaining this part of Austria, which is mainly mountains and Alps. And we didn't have any money to buy coal, and we didn't have our own coal sources. They were all lost after World War I. So we were forced to build these power plants, these water power plants, which now really brings us into the position to be one of the most cleanest railways in Europe. We're also one of the most punctual railways and most reliable railways, as I was mentioning. And one thing which we really, I think, did very well as ÖBB, as a small operator in Europe. In 2016, we took over the night train services of Deutsche Bahn because they wanted to get out of the business for several reasons. And we really achieved that the NightJet became a synonym of night trains in Europe. We carry approximately 1.5 million passengers per year on board of our night trains, European-wide. We connect 25 major cities. We've got an 80% recommendation rate, so people are really happy with our services. And climate change is really one of the top travel reasons. That's why people actually use our night trains. You can see here now the night train network, and it might sound a little bit weird for you, given your huge dimensions you see in the US. But we still operate quite a number of domestic night trains, actually. And this was the nucleus, how we started the international business. From east to west, it takes approximately 8 to 9 hours per train from Wien on the right side to Bregenz on the left side in the white area. So night trains have always been part of the domestic services in Europe. And out of this domestic part, we started growing our international business, and we run now from Austria to all major cities like Brussels, Amsterdam, Berlin, Hamburg, Rome, Milano. And I can tell you this really boosted not only the image of ÖBB, but gave the whole company a new attitude, a new self-awareness of actually what we can do as a small operator in the heart of Europe. And I just took out some pictures here that night trains really are so incredibly emotional that even the New York Times reported on our night trains and about the NightJet network, something which actually would have been not thinkable for us as a small state operator in Europe, that ever New York Times would be interested in our business. So this whole night train business really is one part of the future, but I'm quite honest with you. The night train will never solve the transport issues we face here in Europe. It will always be a niche market, even in the rail business, because of the capacity we have on board of those trains. We need several pillars. One pillar is the night train, but definitely high-speed rail is the way forward to transport millions and millions and millions of Europeans between the major areas in Europe. So there is no other answer than really we have to invest in high-speed infrastructure, connecting the main areas, and in this case, or in doing that, reducing significantly short-haul aviation, because this is, I think, one of the major issues we have here in Europe, We've got quite a significant number of intra-European flights where actually trains could cover the same distance in a time like 3 to 6 hours. We actually also invested a lot in our new night trains. We are currently producing 33 night trains, which will have a totally new customer experience. And what you can see here is our mini suites, because when we did our research, one thing was clear. People are not any longer prepared to sleep with other people they don't know in one room. This time is over. This we had in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, when people really didn't care that much. They booked the couchette coach and 5 other people were in their compartment. Those times are over. You need also to invest in rolling stock. And what you can see here is the mini suites, where actually each passenger has his total privacy. The doors can be locked. And in providing that, one of the main obstacles not using the night trains can be removed, because people were saying, I would like to book the sleeping coach. A sleeping coach is always your own roomette. However, it's too expensive. And I don't want to book the couchette coach where you've got 6 beds in one compartment because of privacy. And I think this is exactly the solution. We can offer here privacy for the price of a couchette coach. Last week, we have presented the first coach from outside of the new NightJet trains. And by beginning of next year, we will present the first interior with this new design. And the first trains will be put in service in December 2022. So it's not that far away. It's something like in the next 18 to 20 months, we will finish the construction and the homologation of the trains. And the first services from Germany and from Austria to Italy will start in December 2022. We also took more care about the families. This is now the family compartment where you have 4 rooms, 4 beds in one room. And we, again, went very much into the needs of the customer. And you can see, for example, the table in the middle. This table can be lowered and you can then put a cushion on top of this table and you've got a perfect playing areas for children. Because another target group, which we really find very, very, very attractive is families. There's nothing better than bringing children on the night train. They love it, they enjoy it, and it's also for the parents much more relaxing than a 10 or 20, 15 hours traveling by car. Last but not least, we've got our high-end product, which will be the new sleeping car, where you will find a bathroom and a shower on board of our trains. This now might not sound so peculiar for you because I know the Amtrak night trains and I took quite a lot of them already in my life and I really enjoyed it. The big problem we have in Europe is that our trains are much smaller in size because our all our infrastructure is actually built to a dimension where we are much more restricted in space. This is, for example, a huge issue for the freight transport. Like in the US, you've got trains where you take containers and put 2 containers of one container on top of the other. We cannot do this in Europe, which makes the freight transport, for example, much more inefficient in Europe than in the US. This is another reason why actually from an economic point of view, I think Europe and the US work quite differently because at least in the freight business, there's a real business case. There's a real competition. There's a real competition also to other modes of transport. Due to our restricted capacities, the situation for railways is actually much more difficult in Europe. And actually also the state aid, which is going into the rail infrastructure and rail services in Europe, much higher than in the US. The NightJet really was a success story, and we keep on extending our network. But again, as I was saying before, we do it in cooperation because probably different than in the US, Europe is so incredibly fragmented from a technical point of view. We've got 15 different safety and control systems in Europe, 15. Technically, you can only put 3 to 5 different systems on a loco. We've got 4 different electricity supply systems. We've got 3 different gauges, the distance between the tracks in Europe. So actually there's nobody who can cover all over Europe on its own. So the way forward for Europe is really the cooperation model in order to get the rail, to get a bigger share for the rail in the modal split. Austria is investing heavily in infrastructure. We are currently building 2 major tunnels. It's the Brenner-based tunnel going from Austria to Italy, which will be, when it's completed, the longest rail tunnel in the world. We are building a domestic tunnel, the Semmering tunnel, which will be approximately 35 kilometers long, linking the 2 major cities in Austria, Vienna and Graz. Graz is the 2nd city in Europe, in Austria. And we're building a completely new line between Graz and Klagenfurt, which is a new high-speed line of about 150 kilometers of distance. So this quite small economy of Austria is really focusing on rail. That's one reason why actually the Austrians are so keen on taking the train, because the infrastructure enables good services. And that's what I always say. The best operator cannot have a decent service if the infrastructure is not suitable. So no matter how much we discuss, either in the US or in Europe, about better services, faster services, more capacity on the trains, it all starts with the investment in infrastructure. Everything else comes then. We need a good, decent infrastructure. And that's the last thing I want to say, because I'm now totally happy about what your president was saying about investing in rail in the US. I think that's great. And I'm also happy to see your new transport minister, actually. The issue also is, and that's, I think, why Austria is also successful, no matter what party actually was in power, and we had the very right-wing parties, we had the very left-wing parties in the last 30 years, the only thing which was consistent in all the planning was actually the railway transport planning. So there was always sufficient funding for the rail infrastructure. Rail infrastructure is a long-term commitment. If policymakers change their mind too quickly, too often about rail infrastructure, at the end of the day, it will be a mess. So what we really need as an industry, we need reliability in the policy decision-making. That's actually the last thing I wanted to mention. So that's a short overview. And now I would be more than happy to discuss, answer questions, or whatever we want to do now.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Bill Porter is asking sorry, there's a little bit of feedback that's distracting me. Do night trains make stops in small towns along the way, or do they go nonstop between major endpoint cities?
No, actually, I'm gonna remove that. You still see the last picture, right? I suppose. Yes. Yes. Actually, we could remove that. Now, the only thing is I don't know how to get rid of it.
If you go up to the top of the screen with your cursor, there'll be a red stop sharing button.
Ah, yeah, I got it. Here we go.
Excellent.
Great. That's a very good question, because what normally people assume, or what we communicate is, there's a night train going from Vienna to Hamburg, for example. the smaller stops in between are at least as important as the big stops, because Vienna has a big airport, Hamburg has a big airport. So there's always an alternative going from Vienna to Hamburg. But if you want to go from Linz, which is the third city in Austria, to Hanover, which is also a big city in Germany, actually there are no direct flights. On the road, you would probably drive like something 8 hours, but the night train goes directly. So yes, we stop in smaller towns because they produce quite a number of trips on board of our night trains.
Okay. And then what fraction of the railroad in Austria is electrified?
Approximately 75%, but on the electrified lines, we produce approximately 95% of the volumes.
Okay, so mostly.
Most, yeah.
I think you answered this question before it was asked, or maybe it was response. Let me see. Have the changes at the national political level impacted investment in rail improvements or not? I think you addressed that just after he asked that question. You were saying it's pretty consistent over political.
Yeah,
periods, right?
that's what we see in Europe. The more consistent the funding is, the better the infrastructure, because infrastructure planning is over decades. So you need to have a budget quite reliable as an infrastructure manager over the several years, at least over the next 5 years. If you're not sure how much money you're gonna have, you will not go into a detailed planning and phase and really start tendering the construction work, et cetera, et cetera. So at the minimum, you need a 5-year funding security that you know you get the money for the next 5 years. Otherwise, how to do the planning, the tendering, that's really an issue.
Yeah, and that's been one of our catch-22s in this country is the state DOTs don't do the planning because they don't see the money coming. So then when the money is there, there's no plan.
Exactly.
And because there's no plan, nobody asks for the money, right? So
this is I mean, you probably know Germany, and Germany is said to be a very organized country. This is one of the major problems in Germany, that there's so much money in Germany. It's the richest, probably one of the richest countries in the world. But the transport policy makers never had a clear long-term plan for funding the rail infrastructure. And that's why it's so fragmented. Germany has an incredibly fragmented rail infrastructure.
So how does the funding work? Does the government subsidize the operations, and where does the funding come from for the infrastructure?
Yeah, there are different funding techniques. So if we speak about the infrastructure, there's a clear plan how much money is going into the rail infrastructure, the road infrastructure, airports, et cetera, et cetera. And this is the infrastructure funding, which actually from a European Union point of view is never a problem. So a state can put as much money into the state infrastructure as the state likes. And then what we have is PSOs. It's called public service obligations, where actually the operation of the passenger services is not subsidized, but is procured. It's a procurement procedure. So normally the state tenders passenger services for a certain period of time, and then operators compete to win the contract, and then they get the service contract and get the money which was defined in the contract for providing these services. Then we've got another technique in some countries, which is aid for procuring rolling stock, because typically one major issue why we don't see so much competition in Europe on rail is that rolling stock is incredibly expensive, and you actually need a business case for at least 25 to 30 years in order to reach the break-even, which is an incredibly long time, and nobody knows what's going to be in 20 years. So giving aids for procuring rolling stock is also a technique which helps to foster rail transport. And we also, in a smaller percentage, have PSOs for freight services. And this is especially the single wagon load business. We differentiate between single wagon load, where single wagons are shipped from one place to another and they are built together for as longer trains in between, blah, 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 blah. And then we've got the intermodal trains, mainly container trains, which are block trains. Block trains can be operated economically without subsidy. But the single wagon business is so much manual work that the state gives some aid in order that this transport stays on the rail and doesn't go to the road. So those are the financing and funding techniques we see here in Europe.
Excellent. And then there's two related questions. I guess there's a battery powered test for CityJet. How is that going? And I talk a little bit about that.
Yes, we actually do tests with the battery trains. The results have so far not been so promising that we would say this is the solution for the regional lines which are not electrified. And I think the race has not yet been won in the industry. What is the most sensible way of powering trains on those lines? Is it hydrogen? Is it battery Bauer? We test all the different possibilities at the moment, but there's not yet a clear winner, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was the other question was, are you testing hydrogen powered?
Yeah. We have both on our rails at the moment, both testing, but not yet a clear winner.
Okay. And then how did the coronavirus impact your business?
Dramatically. Like, okay. I guess all the transport industry.
Yeah.
Figures came down by 90% during the first lockdown. Our first lockdown started in March till mid of May, where really everything in Austria was shut down. The only thing you were allowed to do is going shopping outside. So this was really a phase where basically nobody was traveling. And the numbers came down by 90%. We only transported those people who really had to use the rail. And the situation still is not very good. We are still in a lockdown, but at least shops are open now. And pupils start to go to school again. So traffic is picking up again. However, countries in Europe cope quite differently with the situation. Like in Austria, the private operators and we as the state operators, we both got state aid in order to keep the business running, because otherwise we would have to stop our business. Nobody can operate a railway with 10% of the usual volumes. Nobody can do that. So we got state aid there. In other countries, actually the railways were allowed to make a loss, at least the state railways. So there was this clear commitment. We don't give you money, but we accept the loss in your balance sheet at the end of the year. It's a state company anyway, so it's state loss, and you're allowed to doing that. So all European countries had different approaches. The Austrian approach pretty much came out as a role model because it also took care about the private operators. If you do the second model I was explaining, the state operators always has money because it's a state organization and basically it cannot go bankrupt. And the private operators really had big problems. So in the Austrian case, I think it was the better way to do it. And we still run under an aid on our open access lines where we have to make our money on our own. The NightJet business is completely canceled at the moment, because due to the international travel restrictions, you cannot cross borders at the moment in Europe. So you're locked into your country. The only night trains we run is the domestic night trains from east to west, but we do not run any international night trains because there's simply no demand. Our plan is to open up the business again by end of April, really hoping that in May, the European Union will find a way in order to open up the borders between the member states and make international travel possible again.
Yeah, I'm assuming May of this year, right?
Yeah, May of this year. May of next year, that would, I mean, we would not survive that. We need the passengers back. But I think it's the same for all the economy, no matter whether you're a transport provider, a shop, a service provider, whatever you are, this has to stop now sooner or later. I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm going to my first business meeting in a year on Monday, and I'm not sure I'm really quite ready for that, but I'm also tired of just staying in the office every day. So we've got many, many questions that we're not going to get to all of them. One interesting question here is, DB had a really interesting design for double-decker sleeper trains, where there was the hallway on the side and then you went down or up into the cabin. What was the logic behind going purely single level on the new NightJet trains?
Actually, we still own 10 of those coaches, because it was actually at that time a joint venture between Swiss Railways, German Railways, and Austrian Railways. And we still have 10 of those sleeping coaches, which are the double-deck sleeping coaches. However, if you ever have used those in the lower deck, they're really, really, really small. So the good thing is you get more compartments into the train, but the compartments are incredibly small. There are 4 nice compartments, which are the first class upper deck compartments. They are great, totally great. But the rest of the compartments are pretty difficult to sell. And for that reason, we decided the sleeping coach shall be the top end product, and we want to have it spacious with a sofa, with beds. And then we've got these mini suites, which basically cover the segment for people who want privacy, but cannot afford the cost of a sleeping coach. So we solved this problem in that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, so, most of the train set will be a standard floor level. And then you've got the one car that's going to be lower level, right?
Exactly.
Do you know?
Yeah.
Go ahead, explain the logic behind that and how that works.
Yeah, because what we have in Europe is a quite strong, I think it's the same in the US, called PRM, people with reduced mobility. That's how we phrase it. And what we need, all new trains in Europe have to have the facility for PRM passengers. And in order to cater for that, we decided to have one low floor coach, where you then have the section for the bicycles, the section for the people in wheelchairs, and all the people which actually need a more easy entrance into the coaches. That's why we came up with one low floor coach. And in the day train, which is the same type of train, we even have more low floor entrances spread over the entire train set, because this accelerates the dwell time, right? People boarding, deboarding. This is not an issue for the night train. You don't need to take care about dwell times in night trains, it doesn't matter. But in day trains, this is a big issue, and each minute saved in a stop is a lot. So that's why actually we are quite in favor of the low floor entrances with wider doors, because it makes the exchange of passengers much easier. Okay.
And then, so you've got the low floor for most of the car and then steps up to get over the bogies.
Exactly. Exactly. But the area for the bicyclists, the area for the PRM is all on the low floor deck. So people can, wheelchairs can navigate to the toilet, to the washing rooms, because they are also big for wheelchairs or suitable for wheelchairs. So all this area is then suitable for people with reduced mobility.
Okay. I think in the States that doesn't work, because you have to be able, if there's a different facility in any of the cars, you have to be able to access the entire train. So even those steps would make that not work.
Yeah, but this is again, you can do this because of the width of your trains. In Europe, this wouldn't work because really our limited space is a huge issue. If we would have the same width of trains like in the US, the system in Europe, I tell you, would look completely different.
Okay.
It would be so much more self-economic sustainable.
Because the cars will be wider, you're carrying more people.
Much more people, and especially the freight. It's really more the freight than the passengers. Passengers as well. Look at the in coaches in Russia and in the US. You've got these very generous coaches, big beds, a lot of space. Look into European trains. They are tiny, tiny, tiny.
Okay. And then British are even tinier.
They're even smaller. The British are the poorest anyway, because they are totally tiny. That's why British don't have double-deck coaches anywhere in the network, because the network doesn't allow for that. Tunnels are very tight. So the Brits have a real issue. They cannot use double-decker coaches.
Right, right. Can you talk a little bit about how the access works, so that, you know, when you're going into a different country, you need to get access on the railroad there. How does that work?
It works the same as in Austria, because we as an operators never own infrastructure, and infrastructure managers are never operators. So the system is totally different than in the US. Like, even so, you were seeing that OBB has an infrastructure manager. We have a Chinese wall between us as the operator and the infrastructure manager. And the infrastructure manager has to cater for all needs of all train operating companies. And there's a clear regulation how capacity on tracks, in stations, is assigned. So for us, it doesn't matter whether we operate in Austria or in Germany. We always have to apply for train pass and capacity at the infrastructure manager.
Okay. And it's not like in France, where the infrastructure manager hires SNCF to dispatch the railroad, right? Is there a separate dispatcher?
Yes, but I tell you, even in France now, slowly but steadily, competition is starting to grow, and the infrastructure manager becomes more independent, even in France. This is, I think, the country which was most reluctant to open up the domestic market, but this is now happening. And I tell you, we will see Spanish railways operating to Paris pretty soon. So Renfe will pretty soon start services from Barcelona to Paris. Excellent.
Not that change of trains in Perpignan, which is kind of a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm remembering a decade ago going to visit Renfe, and it was just after the split. And so Renfe had the nice fancy headquarters building. And then to go to visit Adif, the infrastructure manager, you went over to the smaller building. It was on the same campus still, but they had the smaller building over there. You know, I don't know, do you have handy any pictures of the interiors of the RailJets? And is that easy for you to show? I'm sorry, I didn't ask you to have those in advance. Is it?
Hold on a second. I can, of course I have. I can show you some interior design of the new trains we are currently building. I just need to find them. And while I'm looking for, probably we can, so. So what this doesn't make much sense. Let's see where we have some. let's do it that way. Maybe it's even easier like that. So, you know, I will share now my screen. I looked it up now on the internet, to be honest, because that's quicker than looking through all of my.
Sorry to spring that on you. That's my fault.
Not a problem. So, so you can see here, for example, the business class we have on board of our current RailJets. And what we have, quite different to other operators, we actually have 3 categories of services on board of our RailJets. We've got the economy class, which is quite understandable, the low budget class. And then we've got the first and the business class. And don't ask me why. I guess it was a very smart marketeer. It's the other way around than in aviation. So first class and business class are the other way around. In our case, the first class is the middle class and the business class is the top class. I think that's good for confusing all international passengers. I think that's the objective of this, whatever. It was before I was in this position. It is what it is. This is now our top class, where you also then have included like a welcome drink and newspapers. And you have to pay a surcharge for using that. And actually this is perceived or accepted by the passengers pretty well. Yeah, because what we can really see is the travel time is working time. People really got used, as I think with COVID even more, to work remotely and to work when they travel. So this is the huge advantage we also have compared to road or aviation. Because if you try to work on a plane, first of all, you're interrupted all the time because you've got so many stages during your travel phase. And then you sit on this narrow economy seat and try to type something into your laptop. So we can see that really, especially the business travelers, get more and more used to use trains and also have the willingness to pay, because having the economy class is nice, but we also need a yield, at least from some passengers. And we can really see that the business class or the business travelers are a very, very attractive target group where you really can make money with. So that's one example of the interior of our current fleet. If you want to, but I wonder whether this works, I can show you a small video of our current night trains. Let's see whether this works. Now I'm curious. So I've got to do it that way. So let's try it. Here we go. Can you see something?
Yes.
Great. And I can show you another one with some interior. I think this one is very nice. So there's no,
She looks well rested.
So, and this is really what we think is the difference to flying. It's really it's a more cultivated way of traveling, and that's how we sell it. And it really works. It really works perfect.
Excellent, excellent. I do have a question. Somebody asked twice. So is this used as a tool for helping smaller towns with their economic development or staying in the economic grid?
You would not believe it's especially the tourism industry, which is totally eager to get those night trains, because Vienna, I give you two examples. Vienna has not necessarily over tourism, but the tourism of Vienna also needs to bring green issues into their communication. And they found it so incredibly attractive to say that Vienna is the capital in Europe which has most night train connections. This really is something which sells. Another area is the mountain area, where if you take the skiing holidays, actually the transport from Germany to Tyrol and back is the one way where people produce most of the CO2 emissions. Skiing actually is pretty neutral. So if there are night train services from northern Germany to Tyrol, this really makes a difference in the balance of tourism and transport and skiing. So yes, actually everybody fights for night trains. I get many calls from, for example, areas in the northern and eastern sea in Germany, where there's a lot of actually tourism because of the quite nice sea there. And they all ask us, couldn't you start the night train there? We also would fund it. It's difficult anyway, but there is really a demand and a need for that. So yes, it definitely is something which you could consider an economic aid to probably less developed areas. Yeah.
Okay. And then a couple of folks noticed the video, there were cars.
Yes.
Behind the coaches.
We have.
Yeah,
we have actually the car transport. I mean, you've got, I think, one line left in the US, right, where you carry cars. I think somewhere going to Florida or something like that. I'm not sure.
Yes.
Oh, great. I didn't mix up California and Florida. Well, I'm European. You have to forgive me. Yes, we have that, but it's really difficult business because it's very seasonal, right? In summer, it's quite easy to sell those places on the car carrying trains. In autumn and in spring, it's really, really difficult to sell it. However, we run some trains, and especially in, again, the domestic services between Western and Eastern Austria, there are no plans to change that. We even currently work, or we've got one prototype where you can go with your electric car on board of the train and charge it during the night when you go with your electric car on board of the train to another destination. Yeah.
Okay. But it's a difficult business to run.
It is a difficult business, I tell you. From a purely economic point of view, we would have to stop it immediately.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Food. So, I took a conventional train from Munich to Bologna, and I was surprised that there was a diner on the day train. But then when I took a night train from Rome back to Munich, there was no diner.
Sure.
So tell me how the food service works and if it's how important it is.
Actually, one of the biggest complaints of our night train passengers is that there's no dining car. That's really an issue. However, we calculated the business cases up and down, left to right, bottom to top, top to bottom. You don't get a business case out of it. It's the investment in a dining coach is huge, and it does not pay off in the business case. It's as easy as that. However, food is important. So what is, and I think this is a major difference to other European night trains, what is always included is a nice breakfast in the sleeping coaches and in the couchette coaches. And you get it served in your compartment, but there is the facility to have a table, and you can really have a nice a nice breakfast there. And this is very, very well honored by our customers. In the evening, there is also food to buy, but our experience is that most people actually eat before they board the train, and then they only buy beer and wine, which is a good business because beer and wine has a good margin on it, right? So it's always nice if people buy those stuff. But the food in the evening is then actually most of the time consumed before the train departs. And this is also, again, a different situation than in the US because you've got night trains traveling two nights in a row. We don't have these distances in Europe. Trains typically leave between 7 p.m. and 11 p.m. and they arrive typically between 7 a.m. and 9 a.m. So I think the situation is different.
Okay.
But, yeah.
Now I'm just curious on that date from Munich to, I think it was you guys that operated the date.
It's our train, yeah, to Verona, yeah. Or Bologna.
Do people use that diner? Or
yeah.
Significantly?
They use it, but again, it's funny. Again, actually, it's not a business. So if you would see it purely from an economic point of view, you would have to stop this facility. However, a lot of railways have tried that in Europe, and it all ended up in a shitstorm. So even Deutsche Bahn, which in, I think it was 2003, announced that they will terminate all dining car services, got such a shitstorm, and afterwards such a political pressure that since then they still build high-speed trains with a dining car because, yeah, probably more than in the US, rail business is very emotional and very political. And at the end of the day, the state railways do what the policymakers say. And if the transport minister wants to be re-elected, the transport minister decides, state railways, please operate a dining car.
And, you know, I just love going to a dining car on a high-speed train.
It is. So, and we've got really decent food there, I must say. I mean, of course, I have to say that, but I truly think ÖBB has the best food on board of the trains, except probably some trains on the Balkans, because they still cook really like on an oven. If you buy Wiener Schnitzel, they really fried in a pan. Wow, that's really nice. We don't do that anymore because of safety reasons. But after that, I think our food is really decent and nice.
Okay. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to imagine that meal on the Balkan train. That must be nice.
Wow, that's really, it's totally nice. That's a very cultural way to travel, you know. It's not very fast there. You open the window, there's no aircon. It's really like, wow, that's what it used to be in the 70s, probably.
Right. So let's see if there's anything. Back to that question about hydrogen and are you using solar to generate electricity for your trains anywhere?
A little bit, but more for our stations. We have solar panels on some of our stations. However, as I was explaining, our electricity generated from water due to the Alps is sufficient to cater for all the electricity needs of ÖBB.
Oh, okay.
We also did some wind power. We tried wind power. However, you know, we've got now 100 years of history in these water power plants. That's what we really know best. And that's where we are good in.
Okay. And then the last question is one that I've pondered for a long time. Why are there no checked baggage services on European trains?
Yeah, we never actually, this was never the standard in Europe ever. And there might be, actually, it's not an easy question to answer because we know that luggage is one of the major pain points of our customers. You've got to squeeze your luggage then on the baggage rack above your head and it's heavy and then you're scared that it gets stolen. It's a good question, but probably I don't even have an answer. I think if we would offer this, we had luggage coaches in all the trains. We had that, but I think people really preferred to take their luggage with them at the end of the day, even though they were complaining about the luggage, being at the station half an hour before departure, having to give to hand in the luggage. This is something we're not used to, because in Europe, you're used to be exactly on time on the station. There are no check-in procedures. There are no safety controls. It's not like in the US where you have to be at the station anyway quite some time before train departure. Europeans are used to be just on time at the station. So probably this procedure of handing in the luggage is not so suitable for how people use the trains here in Europe.
Okay. Well, we've hit the hour mark. I'm sorry for all the folks that we didn't get to their questions. I really appreciate you being so interested. If you liked this, please go to hsrail.org and make a donation. And our next scheduled one is Brightline in 2 weeks. And I'm considering doing one on Chicago Union Station that I would be giving the presentation on. If you want that, send me an email and I'll schedule that. But hsrail.org to make a donation. And thank you so much for your presentation today. I really appreciate you joining us on a Friday evening to speak with us. So,
thanks very much. I really enjoyed it. Thanks.
Yep. We'll talk again soon.